Welcome back. Elle Ingalls here with Pressure Free Living, and we're continuing this leadership series. I have a really special guest to share with you. His name is Hylke Faber. And Hylke, I would love for you to introduce yourself to everyone and then dive right in. Our topic of this whole series is leadership and how to be more effective, how to be less stressed as a leader, and how to really be, in some cases, our best self in leadership. So welcome, Hylke. So nice to have you with us.
Thank you, Elle, and very glad to be here with you today and with you all today on this series, thinking about what leadership is like. That is an amazing topic. You could say that is a topic that is with us from the time we get here.
It's
Uh,
true.
you know, from the time we
It
get
is.
here.
I'm going to go ahead and spotlight you so that you are our chief speaker here.
Okay,
And I'm so glad you're with us.
same here. Really happy to be here. So, I want to talk about leadership today and what it means to lead from our best self. And that gets us very quickly to a question, which is, well, what is self? Who are we? What is we? I've worked with leaders and teams over the last almost 30 years. Um, in the last 15 years of that as a coach, and I noticed one thing, uh, and we're going to go into that one thing, um, and it has a lot to do with leaders really lead when they're truly themselves. And as we all know, being truly ourselves is a journey. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own journey in becoming more of realizing myself. And as I tell my story, I invite you to sort of listen with a double kind of ear. One side thinking about the external story of what this guy on the screen is saying. At the same time, listen to your own story, because our stories tells a lot about what we are and who we are, and also about what we are not. So that's the question I'm going to invite you to sit with, like, who or what am I, and who or what am I not? Because I found that the most effective leaders are probably even more effective in unlearning what they are not, so that what they are can come to the surface. Michelangelo was once asked, how do you make this beautiful statue, which later was called David, in Florence, in Firenze? And many of you may know the answer that he gave, which was, I saw an angel in the stone and I carved to set it free. I saw an angel in the stone and I carved to set it free. And to me, that's what leadership of self is about. It's setting ourselves free so that that which is the angel inside of us can come to the foreground. And that is not a static thing, that is a dynamic thing. That's a dynamic thing because the angel in us will get challenged when we have to give tough feedback, when we're looking for a job, when the meeting doesn't go well, when we have a big presentation or whatever it is, our inner best self gets challenged to come to the foreground in all kinds of different ways. And the more we're anchored in what that best self is, the more we're able to, you could say, exhale and bring that best self, sing that best self into presence, into manifestation. You could say that is a way I hold life and I hold leadership. So I promised I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. And basically, my story about what I learned about myself and what I've been unlearning about myself. So I'm talking to you today from Phoenix, Arizona, which is not where I'm born, which you can probably tell by the way I say things. I'm from the Netherlands. And I was born on a farm there, on a dairy farm in the middle of the fields. And I remember as a little child how much I loved the big wide expanses. Sometimes from our kitchen window, you could see three lighthouses of the islands in the distance. And there was this expanse and the church steeples and the winds and the clouds rolling through. It was quite a spectacle. I thought it was, at the time I was quite religious. I thought it was a spectacle of God. It's like I thought it was like, this is amazing, having a front seat here about into the mystery of what is. And this kind of came to me quite early in life. I would go to these churches that were built in 1200, and I would listen to the organ that was built in 1600. And this is just a regular old village in the north of Europe, north of Holland. And I would just hear the organ, and I would feel a sense of aliveness and strength and a magnificence that had nothing to do with me, that had always been and that would always be. And I felt very much at home. And then I also had many other experiences where I didn't feel that sense of magnificence, where you could say I maybe experienced more of the rock in me. Um, I noticed that people around me liked riding tractors, and I wasn't too interested in it. Um, and I still tried to ride tractors and pretend, you know. I thought that many people liked girls, at least of my gender, and I wasn't that interested in it. I learned about, you know, my early 30s that I really liked men, um, more as a romantic partner. And um, nevertheless, I still felt being called back into what I now see more as my true self, which is a sense of presence, and which at an early age started to express as music. So I became a French horn player. I made some records and played in orchestras, and even got to these shores, uh, first in Boston and then Texas as a teenager, playing in a Dutch youth wind orchestra. And I felt very much at home there, but I wasn't strong enough at the time, meaning my awareness wasn't strong enough that that's what was pointing closer to what I was. Because when I was thinking about what to do for a living, I started listening to the voices around me that said, well, how are you going to make a living as a musician? That's not going to work for you. So my socialized self, you could say part of the rock, was like, okay, you know what? I'll do this then. And I part of me knew I was playing a game. So I went to the most prestigious business school I could find in the Netherlands, and uh, made it there. And then I went to another prestigious school in the US, and I had still I something was me. It's not totally asleep. I said, well, maybe I want to do some good in the world. So I become an ambassador. So I went to a school for foreign relations, and that was in Washington, D.C. And my classmates started to go in droves to Wall Street and to the big consulting companies in New York City. And I started to understand about money and how much money you could make that way, and a little bit about these big, tall buildings. And I remember once going to New York City and I saw these big, tall buildings, and I was having a similar kind of feeling that I felt when I visited Jerusalem a year before. There's that big white city on the hill. And I was like, oh, that's it. I got to be here, not as a tourist, but I've got to be here as the director or the CEO or the owner of one of those big, tall skyscrapers. And I started to work really hard for that. I didn't become an ambassador. I started doing strategy consulting, and there were many great parts about that too. I learned about innovation and working together in teams, which I loved. But there was this part of me that was striving, that had to be the best, better than, perfect, all parts of the rock I discovered later, but that's how I identified at the time. All these false identifications I got lost in. I got so lost in them that for a while a couple of years, I didn't sleep much. I sometimes wouldn't sleep for a week. And during one of those sleepless weeks, I was interestingly back in the north of the Netherlands while I was having this big job in New York City. And I had an office as a managing partner, so a partner in a strategy consulting firm. My office was right next to the Chrysler building. Um, I thought I had it made, but the issue was I wasn't sleeping anymore. My body was falling apart. My relationships were really challenging and difficult. Um, and I was having this insomniac night in on this island together with my friends. I was on vacation in north of the Netherlands. I still remember. And this had been going on for a couple of days again. And I was like, something got to change. What happened to the little boy who loved the fields, the lighthouses? And I was actually sleeping next to one of them on that vacation that I'd been seeing as a little boy. that loved nature, that was in awe with life, that had friends. I sacrificed all that to be successful. That's how, and I said, I look successful, but I don't feel successful anymore. And as life often does, when one makes a choice to change something, the universe comes in sometimes to say, okay, I got you. So I discovered there was something that was turned out to be very helpful for me, which was meditation. And I started meditating, and after 1 hour of meditating, I could sleep again. And I can't tell you what a relief it was. It was like somebody opened the door and said, come over here. You want to go home? Right here. It's right here. Right here. Could sleep again. And I discovered a sense of peace and well-being and love. And as one of my teachers later described, constancy, something that never changes and yet always is here, that I can rely on. And I started to really become fascinated by that. So fascinated that I almost became a monk, because I still had that sort of A-type personality. So that part of the rock, the identification, I have to be the best, hadn't completely gone. It still hasn't completely gone. And so it was pulling me into like an extreme, for me extreme, not saying monk is extreme, but for me extreme flight into an other identification. So it had been like, the tractor rider, the guy who was out with girls, or the perfectionist, or the partner, all of these kind of images that I was pursuing. And now I was going to be the perfect meditator. And so I was going to be the monk. I kind of thought I had to outdo the Dalai Lama or something like that. I definitely had to get some kind of title. And then I was working with a coach who was coaching me at the time. And she said, what are you running away from now? Subconsciously, I understood I had been running away from the Netherlands in some way, because there were some things about me that I wasn't willing to face. That was a time also I came out as a gay person. Found that too difficult to do in the place where I was born. And I now realize. And I realized I've been running away from the business world, because I've been working in the business world, and I realized most people in humans in form are actually working in business. So why, or in organizations, why don't I help people access this essence that is what is constant, this strength in us, um, as part of my calling? And so that's now more than 15 years ago. That's how I found and chose this work of coaching and culture and team transformation. And it's always interesting, when you see a mountaintop, you're like, there it is. And you almost feel like you're there. And that turned out the beginning of a whole other journey where I had to undo a whole lot of other identifications of like being very special, being a great teacher, being the best, having the best methodologies, all these things I had to unlearn. And I'm still unlearning. I'm as I become older, I'm learning as a coach, as I work with leaders, to make things simpler and simpler. I use methods, but I'm also happy to let them go. So one of the methods that I've been using, I call taming your crocodiles, which is basically what we've been talking about, like becoming aware of our crocodiles, which is, in my view, the crocodilian, the reptilian imagery that we fall prey to, especially when we're stressed. So those images we conjure up in our consciousness that say, over here, you'll be good. Over here, you'll be loved. Ride a tractor, go out with girls, be perfect, make as much money as you can, impress the heck out of the econ, become the best meditator. All of these are like egoic images that I ran after, and they have more power when I am not thinking clearly, and I'm more likely not thinking clearly when I'm stressed.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
So it's that's become part of my work, helping people to become aware of the images that disconnect them, and then step more into that true leadership and realize, what are my deeper values? Because it's not only the crocodile that gets tamed, it's also the owl, which is another image that we use to say this is like what you can grow into, that you can anchor into. I got images of the owl when I was a little boy, seeing this divine display in front of my kitchen window, or listening to the organ, or playing the music. But I also had that as I was working with others in conference rooms and innovating and working with clients as a strategy consultant. I loved that, right? Or watching out the window from the airplane and just feeling completely at peace. And it became more, you could say, tangible as I started meditating, and as I started to make a conscious study of what is true about us. So that's what this method is about, and this way of working is about. I really work with people to help them figure out what's true about them, so we can let go of what's not true about them, about them. And so I ask you now, as you're sort of as we're sitting together, sort of, and maybe let's just say that we're really sitting together. Now, what is one thing that you may have held as true about yourself, that deep down your true self knows is not true? Actually, you don't need it. It's often something that has to do with fear, like, oh, I'm afraid to live without that, like being the best, or being the one in control, or being the one who's liked, or the one who belongs, or even the one who makes an impact, or is special, or better, or seen. All these things that we make up and just die with us when this body leaves. So, like, how much longer do you want to carry these things? And who would you be without them? And who would you be without them in a particular challenge that you're facing? Like, I often work with people on particular, like, day-to-day challenges. What's going on for people, like, right now, right? So challenges are our teachers. You could say they are our rock carvers. They're like, okay, you want to shed some rock? Let me send you this rock carver, this teacher, to show you a bit more about what your rock might be about. So one challenge that I'm facing is that I'm slowly transitioning from being very private in my practice, working with one-on-one, or working with teams, or working with large groups, but always very much in a protected setting, to becoming much more out there, because I believe that this work, which is not only done by me, which is done by many, including UL, needs to be shared and needs to be practiced. And however we practice it, we need to practice it, especially in this world, which seems so fraught with running for all kinds of false imagery, which is getting us as humanity into deeper and deeper trouble, leading to polarization, climate destruction, nature destruction, and destruction of ourselves and our future. So I think it's getting more and more important. So I said, well, and I enjoy doing this. Like, I want to scale. So I've been scaling. I've been doing podcasts and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my challenges, that how this scaling teacher is a teacher for me, how the scaling challenge is a teacher for me, is that my favorite book as a boy was called Alone in the World, gets challenged. I cannot do this by myself.
That's so true. Yes. So beautiful, Hylke. So beautiful. Almost mesmerizing to listen to you. I'm gonna share our screen now in gallery mode, because something happened to me recently. I shared it with another speaker I recently interviewed, but what you just shared with me speaks so deeply to it. And it's our connection as musicians. So I was from the time I was tiny, I wanted to be an orchestra conductor. I also wanted to be a professional violinist, but I also wanted to be a conductor. And when I was at the University of Michigan, my first conducting teacher said, "You have some gifts and you should work on this. Like this is," and so the school had never admitted into the graduate program in orchestral conducting a woman ever. And so I was the first. I refused to think that it wouldn't happen. Like I almost willed it into being in every fiber of my body. And the last time I've been on the podium was 1992, which has been a long time now, 30 years. So I chose another path. I did other things, but there was still this nagging guilt that I have all this expertise, all this knowledge. I've worked with some of the greatest conductors in the world, Leonard Bernstein, Seiji Ozawa, Kurt Masur, like amazing people. I've been in the rooms with them. I've been in the green rooms with them. And I know so much. And just the other morning, oh, and also like my conducting professor in the graduate program, the last time I saw him, he died just a few years ago at 84. He said, "Why aren't you on the podium? Like, why aren't you there?" He's Swiss. And so the guilt again, the guilt coming in. So what I'm hearing you say, and what aligns with what just happened to me, I woke up in a kind of prayerful mode, and what came over me was that, oh, maybe I was the one to just break the glass ceiling so that others could come. Because the next year, a woman from Brazil was admitted. And now there have been many women who've gone through that program. So maybe that was my role. So I can let go of that. I'm almost going to cry. Let go of that guilt and that shame. You know what I'm saying? And free myself to do what I feel very called to do, which is this work.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I got goosebumps as you were sharing that, Ellen. There's an interesting parallel here. I also wanted to be a musician. And I trained in my 30s also to become an opera singer. And I loved it. I've also been present to a few people who have died over the last year. And it's interesting that as a leader and as a human being, it's easy for me to attach to an image of what happiness and fulfillment looks like. Like in your case, being the conductor on the podium, right? Or in my case, being the French horn player or the opera star or whatever it might be. And I really sat with that. And now when I hear you say, well, part of my essence is being a gift for others, right? Like you're opening a door to somebody else. And even if that hadn't happened in your lifetime, even if I never become a musician on stage, there's something in me that has recognized itself. And that we can always take with us, like in this conversation, right? Like if you think about what is it like when you make music, or when you listen to music, or when you're fully in presence, or when you're totally letting go of all the shells, or when you're deeply in love with somebody, or when you look at nature and it takes you over, something in us gets opened. And maybe that opening is the gift and not what's opening us, you know?
Wow. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so if I think about that as, because this can sound esoteric, and I'm going to invite us to make it also very practical. Because as leaders, we may be thinking that either we always have to get the next promotion, and get more responsibility, or this doesn't matter at all.
Mhm.
And I think neither of which is true. It is, ask yourself, what is for my highest growth, so that I will realize more and more what I am, and therefore and be of service from that place. So maybe that means I'll stay an individual contributor my whole life, or I take on the mantle of this entire company and become the CEO. But I'm not going to become the CEO. I'm going to be in this role as CEO and serve from that place, and know full well that its primary function is to wake me up more to my potential, to what is true about me, so I can pass it on to others, and be as next generations can blossom from that, and we can be of service from that, or whatever is true for you. Like, I realize I'm giving an answer which is probably not the way to go. That's the way I relate to it. But I would ask you and ask people to think about as they think about what being our true, leading from our true self looks like for them, is
Mhm.
what am I really, really deeply called to be?
Mhm. Mhm. I remember I was working with a client who had a quite prestigious job, and through our work together, which didn't have much to do with the job, it was more definitely about the person. They ended up not just going laterally, but taking a position down over here, which was their true passion. And I saw this person a year later, and I almost didn't recognize her because the joy on her face, the illumination coming through her was just so profound. And I said, "Oh, you are in a very good place now, aren't you?" And
Yes,
it was so true. It was like the right thing to do, to let go of that prestige and
yes,
go where she was really called.
yes,
So
yeah,
yeah, I think people get caught in that. Like it's true. We get caught in these strange webs, and
yeah.
getting free is huge. It's really huge.
And I've gotten caught in it, and I still get caught in it, because part of my circuitry inside is very invested in being important. And then when I look at it, I just feel pain.
Mhm.
That's not what I am. Now, at the same time, um, I had this dream when I was in my 20s. And this dream was like this: we are all born in half circles, holding each other's hands. And like we're kind of floating through life in half circles. And every person in the chain, in the half circle, has a particular role. They're all indispensable, whether in the middle and the side and so on. And as I had this dream, I heard saying, and you are one of the people that stands on the end of a half circle. And with that comes a responsibility, to explore, to be a visionary, to say, hey, maybe it's over here, right? To be firm in leadership. But does that make me more special? No. And so I to me, what I'm one of the lessons I'm learning that I can then share with my clients is to say, so what station in your life are you planted in right now, and how can you be of service from that?
Mhm.
And I often find it's a relief. Like, oh,
Mhm.
there's
Mhm.
a book that I love. It's called How Starbucks Saved My Life. And it's about many things. It's about a PR executive, like some person that had lots of big title, like SVP or something. And they got cancer. For whatever reason, they at some point weren't able to afford the healthcare anymore and the health insurance. So just to make it all work, they took a job at Starbucks cleaning toilets. And this person recovered from their cancer, and also discovered that they loved cleaning toilets and
Oh,
making Starbucks clean. they said in this book, they said, I never want to get back to that corporate job I had. That's not who I am. I love doing this.
Wow. Wow. You know, I think of that too as the role of a parent. So one of the reasons I didn't go into becoming an international conductor was I wanted a family. And now my last son has graduated college. The first year I'm not preparing a child to go to school. It's a totally different feeling. And I we have my sons and I have amazing relationships, like really, really, truly amazing relationships that I wish everyone could have with their children, because we never had any bad years ever, like none of the things that most people go through, but that was intentional. It was very intentional as parents, how we raise our children. Same kind of thing, like, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to.
Yeah.
And it was so all the time and energy, not just quality time, but quantity time. And what we did was, it was all so meaningful and worth it. And I mean, it amazes me when one of my sons will say, would you like to go for a walk? And they'll hold my hand. It's beautiful. We were all just together for a weekend wedding in Wisconsin, and like little interactions with each one of them in just a really beautiful way. And I think another part of it is when you're open and you're free, you can cherish each one of those little things. And you will remember them, because if you're in fight or flight, you can't remember.
Right.
People don't remember things because they were so stressed when they were occurring, or nervous or anxious or whatever, that, in the fight or flight state, that they don't even remember the great things either.
Yeah.
So it's
Absolutely.
fascinating. Well, Hylke, we could talk. I've enjoyed this so much, and what you've brought forward here it's incredibly meaningful, and there's almost a tenderness to it that I am very, very grateful for. So thank you for sharing. And we will have some links down below here so people can get in touch with you. And I know you're putting something special together with some of the articles that you've written, which will be really worthwhile for people. So I really encourage you to check out what Hylke has prepared for you here, and to follow him on LinkedIn and other things as he's coming into the world, as I am too, trying to, so that we can touch more lives and help more people. And that can be hard, especially if you've done other things and suddenly you're like a solopreneur, as you may be on the other side of the screen there, trying to come out and do your thing, maybe perhaps after many years of working for a company, or you're exploring out, or you're doing a little side hustle on the side too. So many people are doing that today too, and that takes guts and bravery, and finding your true self and letting go of some of those things. Maybe you'll clean toilets at Starbucks. I love that story. It's so beautiful. Well, Hylke, thank you so much for sharing.
You're so welcome, Alan. As a coda to this, I can't resist. When you said true self, you pointed right here. And in the cacophony of our minds' directions, that to me is always the lighthouse that guides me back to, okay, that's you are. And this is what you're called to do here, whether it's as a leader, as a coach, or as a husband, or as a friend. And so I invite, if you're listening right now, just to allow yourself to drop into the body, and if that resonates with you, into the heart, and ask yourself, what's true about me now? What is really true about me now that I can rely on? And how will I bring that forth? How will I bring that forth? Thank you for being together today. I really enjoyed our conversation, Al.
Thank you so much. And stay tuned. We will have more speakers for you. I'm so glad that you're paying attention to these leaders, and Every single one of them has a beautiful takeaway, and Hylke, you had several takeaways tonight that have touched my heart. So thank you so much.